world of difficulties, boy. Sometimes you hate when they're technical, don't you? Shit. WWE and Jake Paul. So we saw at Crown Jewel accompanying Logan Paul, other than the two Stooges, was his brother, Jake Paul. And he got kind of involved in the match with the Usos, laying them out with some wicked right hands or clotheslines or whatever they were. But he got involved in a little bit. Logan Paul didn't end up the victor. It came out post-match. Logan Paul actually tore his knee up pretty bad during the match. And so, press conference, post-show, Jake Paul is asked, would you be open to working with WWE in the future? And paraphrasing, of course, basically certainly. He'd be more than open to it. It definitely makes sense, he said. There's mutual interest on both sides. And I mean, if Logan's not going to be there, I don't see how you work Jake Paul into everything. Not really sure if Jake Paul has any fights coming up or anything like that. So it'd be interesting to see what they might do with him. He's a great talker. He's a master marketer. He knows how to play people like a fiddle. So I mean, I'm definitely interested. Logan Paul came in, and I wasn't too excited because, you know, a celebrity getting into wrestling, having wrestling matches. But his first impression was a good one. His second one was even better. And then third, they threw him at Roman Reigns, and he impressed again. So if Jake Paul is going to get involved, I would hope they let him. I'm not sure what they do with Jake Paul. Regardless of what they would do or what they could do with Jake Paul, like I said, he's an entertainer, point blank period. And he has an athletic background. As we see, he's a boxer. So Jake Paul getting involved in WWE could be good. You know, like I said, he can talk. He's got charisma. He's got an athletic background. All he's going to really need to do is work in the ring. And as we've seen, if he dedicates himself to learning the art of professional wrestling, as he did learning the art of boxing, I mean, this dude can go far. And if then if Logan comes back in about a year's time, and then they want to use Jake and they want to go forward with them two as a tag team, by all means, go for it. You know, so that's something they could do. Love it or hate it, it'd be big money. They'd get reactions. They draw eyes. They put butts in seats. You know, and that's at the end of the day what you want in professional wrestling. Results. So WWE, Jake Paul working together soon, we'll see. But it could be real good. Austin Theory's failed cash-in. What are they doing with this kid now? Here's a good kid. Can cut a promo. In-ring ability, psychology, athleticism, charisma. He's young. Great physique. A booker's dream. This kid. And look what they're doing with him. It's clear they have no direction for Austin Theory. And yet, he's always on TV. How is he benefiting from that? Other than, of course, the paycheck, the exposure. But when you're being exposed in this bad of a light, is that really helping you, or you know what I'm saying? I mean, Vince clearly saw something in Austin Theory. And he was beating everyone over the head with Austin Theory. Just literally shoved him into the Money in the Bank match and made him win. So now with Vince out of the picture, it's the complete opposite. It seems like they're breaking Austin Theory down now. And the final part of deconstructing Austin Theory was removing the Money in the Bank briefcase off of him. And that's what they did. So as for Austin Theory, the failed cash-in, I see it as them trying to deconstruct Vince's Austin Theory. And the final step in that was removing that Money in the Bank briefcase off of him. Where they go from here with him, I believe he's far too talented to be just shoved by the wayside. So I fully expect them to push him, but a repackaging is coming. It's got to. The way he's looked over the past couple months, a repackaging has to be coming. And I'm not against it. I think it's about time. Unfortunately, but fortunately, I think it's about time. So I'm a big fan of Austin Theory. I think he can go very far. But with WWE, it's all about the booking. So let's see what they do with Austin Theory. Speaking of about the booking, Bobby Lashley. We're getting heel Lashley back. We're getting heel Bobby Lashley back. So, Bobby Lashley being a heel is the best thing for Bobby Lashley. With that being said, Bobby Lashley's overall package, whether it be babyface or heel, he benefits from having a manager. Because Bobby Lashley isn't the best orator of words. And it seems sometimes when left up to his own devices or left alone, the mic and him don't have a mutual relationship, to put it nicely. With heel Lashley, I hope they put him back with MVP somehow, some way. Let's forget the war Bobby Lashley and Omos had. Let's forget it. MVP, Bobby Lashley, Omos. And do something with that. Make MVP the manager of the monsters. There you go. And let them terrorize Raw, SmackDown, the WWE. Let them win championships. That'd be a good little faction or stable, whatever you want to call it, to put Bobby Lashley back in the world title picture. Because you for sure ain't putting a world title on Omos. I know that's right. So that's what I'm thinking. Find a way to put Bobby Lashley back with MVP. Let's forget about Omos and Bobby Lashley's war. And we're going to go on from there. Put the tag belts on. Before you do that, let them smash through competition. Legitimize them. Establish them as a heel tag team. put the tag belts on them. And if you want, then you can put Bobby Lashley into a program with essentially a giant and an evil mastermind behind him. And the reason why it's perfect to put Bobby Lashley in a title picture, even though he's in a tag with Omos, is because Omos for sure ain't getting the belt. And he can be a perfect bodyguard to someone who looks like a bodyguard and doesn't need a bodyguard, but is just a bully. With, like I said, his giant and evil mastermind behind him. I think that can be perfect for Bobby Lashley. So we'll see what they do. And now, the nitty gritty. When I think about the state of AEW, I feel extremely bad for Tony Khan. I feel like in his head, he wants to rid himself of the EVPs, Matt and Nick Jackson, Kenny Omega. I feel like he wants to get rid of them. I feel like he wants the company to move past them. But unfortunately, it's him who got into bed with them. And if if Tony somehow wants to part ways with them, it's not going to be pretty. And Tony's going to have to deal with what CM Punk dealt with. The narratives being spun backstage, the lies and the twisted stories being spread, the defaming of your name. Although there's some people who probably have a pretty bad image of Tony in their minds anyway. You know, I'm sure the Young Bucks would not mind furthering those images if Tony took it upon himself to rid himself of essentially the fleas he got from laying down with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. AEW is at a point where, and honestly, they're like 3 going on 4 years in soon, or maybe just hit 3 years. I didn't think AEW would get to the point where they didn't need the Bucks and Omega until about 5 years down the road. Like, I thought AEW would have to be more established, essentially, for those established, world-traveled, independent guys necessarily weren't needed anymore. I thought AEW would have got to about 5 years before they didn't need Kenny and the Young Bucks anymore. But looking at it, it seems like the AEW fans want more. Because with AEW Dark Elevation, yes, they're YouTube shows. And don't get me wrong, people shit on them. I shit on them from time to time because they're YouTube shows and they just intermingle talent, exchange talent through those shows. They don't necessarily retain most of those talents. But some of the talents that come through there, some of the matches that are on there are good matches. Some of the guys and girls that are on those shows are good talents. So essentially, when you see the talent on those shows, and then you come over to your weekly shows, when you come over to a Dynamite, when you come over to a Rampage, and you see essentially subpar sports-based professional wrestling, it makes you wonder what you could have when you're letting all this talent sit in the back and sit at catering and watch. And I think that's where the AEW fans are. I think all of us that support AEW right now should be asking that question. If there's all this talent backstage, and some of the talent we're getting on a weekly basis is consistently subpar, why is there no changing of the guard? Some of you said it in the comment section of my video when what I said about when Tony Khan, essentially, if you weren't one of those people Tony Khan was pictured with, like, embracing, that you weren't going to get pushed, that you weren't going to be seen on TV. Some of you agreed with that. A lot of you agreed with that. But now we see that Tony Khan, that's something wrong that he picked up from the Young Bucks. Essentially, Tony Khan pushing those people that he's pictured with embracing, essentially him pushing those people to the forefront, shoving them down people's throat because he likes them. He learned that from the EVPs. He learned that from the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Because what did they do when they came into AEW with their friends and professional wrestlers that they liked? Shoved them down people's throat. Did all kinds of matches with them, week after week on TV. Exciting gymnastic wrestling matches. Week after week after week. Gymnastic wrestling. That doesn't even make sense. Week after week. See? Doesn't make sense. Week after week after week. That's what we got. Their friends on TV with them for essentially 2 years. And then the rift came when Tony started bringing in the people he liked, but they didn't like. So how does Tony rid himself of the EVPs? How do you rid a dog of fleas? Cut it down real close, and you give it a flea bath. So what Tony's going to have to start doing in AEW is trimming some of that fat. Trim that roster down real close, so we can see who the liabilities are on that roster. On the AEW roster, if you eliminated all that basic sideline mid-card independent talent and you really kept your only your top guys, you would see a Kenny Omega, Matt and Nick Jackson. Their upside isn't up there with that of a Jungle Boy, of a Ricky Starks, of a Powerhouse Hobbs, of a Hook. Even I'll go as far as Trent, because Trent by himself is a good worker. Trent with the best friends is garbage. And there's a ton of other guys in AEW that with a little change in presentation and spotlight could be potential stars. And lastly, we'll touch on CM Punk. It was said by PW Insider, I believe, CM Punk wanted to tone down AEW style. Now, first, I'll say, um, if it don't work for CM Punk, it don't work for nobody. Take that however you will. But if it's one thing that we've learned from CM Punk throughout his career, is that if it don't work for him, it ain't gonna work out for nobody. That's one. Two, look at social media. Look at the bevy of compilation videos of just the week after week fuck ups on both their national shows and their YouTube shows. Is CM Punk wrong for wanting to tone down AEW style? What is AEW style? I thought about that, and I looked at essentially Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, because they were the cornerstones of this when this whole thing started. Yeah, Cody. Yeah, Chris Jericho. Nah. When this whole thing started, it was about Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. And if you ask me, I'm not the biggest fan of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, but their style of wrestling does have a following. And all cups of tea aren't for everybody. They're essentially high octane style of wrestling. That high octane, essentially, kind of lucha libre esque type of wrestling. It's not for everyone. All the flips and the tricks and the kicks and it's not for everyone. But essentially, that's what AEW. That's a lot of what AEW was when they first started and still is. And looking at what CM Punk was doing when he came in, he wanted to tone down AEW to, I guess, a more professional wrestling based style throughout the show. Is CM Punk right for wanting to tone down their style when he came in? And for longevity purposes, I believe yes. Only because obviously with the flips and all the high risk moves, the more you do those, the more toll you take on your body, in addition to the bumps that you're taking throughout the match. Coming off the top rope, springing off the ropes, diving outside the ring, that shit hurts. That's a lot of pressure on your knees and your hips, your back. That shit hurts versus working a more professional wrestling, working a more traditional professional wrestling style. You can do that a lot longer, a lot more longevity, essentially. But in doing that, you have to have strong charisma. You have to have strong in-ring presence and ability. You have to have strong promo ability to get yourself across and over to the audience. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, that high octane professional wrestling style that they do, it it doesn't lend itself to longevity. I mean, how long can you be a peak form lucha libre talent? How long can you perfectly execute those moonsaults? You know? How long is your body going to allow you to do those out of the ring dives? And just because you have the ability to do it doesn't necessarily you have to exploit it every time. And that's another gripe I've had with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, as far as that high octane style that they have. It's just like, if you guys would come out and have shorter matches and get different shit over at different times, instead of having these 20-minute matches and trying to get all your shit over at one time. You know, like I said, longevity. Even like I said, even with that lucha libre-esque style, how long can you do that? You can do it for a long time if you do it in short spurts. You understand? The cows left the barn on this one. And it's gone too far. And so I would say CM Punk, he's not wrong for wanting to tone down the style. I think CM Punk coming in and essentially wanting to tone down the style, I think, was him just trying to get longevity out of the product. We see a couple high flyers on the AEW roster. A lot of their guys that work that high octane style, they get hurt a lot. We see throughout wrestling those more high risk maneuvers that are exciting but are leading to more injuries. It's not to say wrestlers back in the day didn't get hurt. They did. Every night. But that's the thing. They got hurt, not injured. You can work hurt. Can't work if you're injured. A broken ankle, you're injured. You ain't hurt. I got a little pain in my elbow from the show last night. You're hurt. You can work again. Icy hot slap on an elbow pad. You'll be straight. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's what CM Punk was. I think that's what he was trying to do, even with his matches, like I said, when you look at him. Building a story, telling a story with professional wrestling. And he kept doing that with every time he came out there. So CM Punk wanted to tone down AEW style. He's not at all wrong for that. I think he was just trying to essentially promote backstage a style of wrestling that would more cater to longevity with the wrestlers backstage, which would in turn give them longer careers and put more money in their pocket. Backstage politics and other things didn't let that happen. And it's unfortunate, again, like I said, that he's the only one, him and Ace, that ended up leaving the company over what happened after All Out. And I feel for Tony because I know he wants to rid himself of the EVPs. I know he wants to rid himself of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. But those three are essentially a cancer that he opened himself up to and welcomed them in because he wanted to get chummy with all the cool professional wrestlers. And I think he's seeing now that they burned him. It was a hoax. It was all a gimmick. They were in it for themselves. And now when people lash out at Tony, and now people point the finger at Tony, and Tony looks like the bad guy. But essentially, Tony just didn't know this whole time. And that's it right there. That's why I feel bad for Tony. He was essentially just ignorant to what he was going to get because he saw what he could get, and in his head he had an image of what he wanted. And in his mind, pairing up with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega was going to get him to that promised land, get him to where he wanted to be. And he's seeing now that that may not have necessarily been the best way. He should have did it the way that all startup promotions and territories did it back when. You surround yourself with people from the business who know the business and have done it successfully. And when he started AEW, Tony didn't do that. You bring in someone like CM Punk who wants to come in and essentially change the landscape and trajectory of your company, wants to push the young stars that you have backstage and that the fans are clamoring for, but keep getting stuck in catering because the Young Bucks and Omega have their friends that they want to put on TV, and we give Tony shit for doing the same thing. But these guys are still here, still holding executive positions in the company. Like, come on. If people in the wrestling industry are going to pile on Tony, I mean, there are wrestling minds in those offices that should be sharing some of that blame, to be completely honest. The EVPs of AEW should give those positions up. They're not fit for those positions. Execution from them in those positions has been poor. And any proper executions from them in those executive positions have been done out of favoritism and doing favors for their friends, which is not how you should operate as an executive vice president of a national wrestling promotion. Plain and simple. Not much else to say. Tony Khan, ignorant. It's hard to say if he was willfully ignorant. It's hard to say if he just didn't want to take information people was giving to him, because it was before he started AEW. He met with people who had been in the wrestling industry, but how many of them did he hire? Outside of Chris Jericho, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. 5 people who are extremely full of themselves. And here's Tony, small little meek billionaire with money just hanging out his pockets, and these guys just doing the worst to him. Doing him bad. Tony didn't know. The Young Bucks, Omega, Chris Jericho, Cody, they knew. They took advantage of Tony. And I'm only putting Cody in there because he was there too when it started. And he should have known what Chris Jericho was. He should have known what Kenny Omega was. He should have known what the Young Bucks were from the start. And he did, but he too saw it as an opportunity for him to get his shit over as well. And he did that too. So he shares that blame as well. They all knew what it was. Tony didn't. All 5 of them took advantage of Tony. People in the wrestling industry should be looking at Tony and seeing that he needs help and wanting to help him out. AEW's at a point right now, they're wobbling. They're still early. They're not as established as WWE. We don't need to talk about WWE. No one wants to talk about WWE. They can put forth the worst wrestling, and ESPN is still going to be talking about SummerSlam and WrestleMania. So it doesn't really matter with them. Let them do whatever. But right now, we have an opportunity in the wrestling industry for some change. And it's coming through. It's coming by way of Tony Khan. But he just needs to get people around him. Who know what the fuck they're doing. And aren't full of themselves, but are full of love for the professional wrestling industry and want to see this thing do better and want to see young talent do better and flourish in styles and in ways that would put tons of money in their pockets, tons of butts in the seats, tons of eyes on the TV screen. Tony didn't know. Tony still doesn't know. Tony thinks he knows, because the people that around him that are taking advantage of him are telling him, yeah, you know, yeah, you're doing a good thing. Yeah, as long as you keep letting me do whatever I want to do, you're doing just great. And that's what we're getting. And that's what Tony's getting. Tony's got to trim the fat, cut that thing real close, and really make some hard decisions. It's tough being a crude businessman. Business and pleasure never mix. As a booker, as a promoter, you can't afford to be best friends with the talent. It's always going to sully the product that you have to pull out, that you have to put out and give to the fans. And that's what we're seeing in AEW. So Tony, it's time to buck up. Figure out what the fuck is really going on. Grow some nuts. Get some people who have been around wrestling, who know what the fuck to do, who know how to get this shit over. Put them in positions to make a difference in your company. And in turn, make a difference in professional wrestling. WWE's audience is established. They are who they are. The only people watching WWE now are the ones who are extremely devoted to it already, which is a good 1 million, maybe 1,800,000 people, I guess, in this country. Which leaves a lot more for the taking. And this is where Tony comes in. Pedal to the metal, foot on necks, and do business. Take the game by storm. WWE's audience is there, extremely devoted. AEW's audience is AEW's extremely devoted. And people wanting to see something different in pro wrestling. The audience is growing and can keep growing. But when you have Chris Jericho on there for about 30 minutes doing foolishness, people don't want to see that. When you have the Best Friends on there with Orange Cassidy doing foolishness, People don't want to see that. People want to see FTR. People want to see Ricky Starks. People want to see Hook. People want to see Colton and Austin Gunn. People want to see the Acclaimed. People want to see Britt Baker. People want to see Serena Deeb. People want to see MJF. It's time for a new turn in AEW. CM Punk essentially for AEW was what he wants to be in pro wrestling, what he wants to be remembered as in pro wrestling, and that's a martyr. Well, his lifeline in AEW was just cut short because he was trying to do a good thing and he went out fighting. It's up to Tony now to not let his EVPs strong arm him into doing things their way, like he has been doing. Keep doing things your way, Tony, and keep good people around you that actually know what to do in pro wrestling and not just what to do with themselves. And that's that.